Hi everybody, this is section A-4. We're going to take a look at some special angle pairs here, as well as some of the relationships that we see in these angles. So as we take a look at the notes, you're going to see the learning target is to identify special angle pairs and use their relationships to find angle measures. So there's various types of angles that you want to look for, and you want to start training yourself to look for these angles when you're seeing diagrams like you see over here on the right. Adjacent angles, we don't use them a whole lot, but it is nice to know that when I say, well, what's an adjacent angle, you know what you're looking for. So adjacent angles are two angles that are basically right next to each other. They have a common side right here, and they share a common vertex. They're also coplanar, so they're on the same plane, which is kind of important, but that's really not going to be an issue for us. So here's two examples of some adjacent angles. Angle 1 and angle 2. They're adjacent, and angle 3 and angle 4 are adjacent. So right next to each other. If we came down to this drawing, you would see that angle 1 and 3, for example, are adjacent. 3 and 2 are adjacent. 2 and 4 are adjacent. 1 and 4 are adjacent. Okay? So that's, again, another example of adjacent angles. And you see them in lots and lots of diagrams. The next one is probably, in my opinion, the most important type of angle for you to recognize. If you were to take two lines just like this and intersect them, you would create 4 angles. And those angles are called vertical angles. Now, not all 4 of them. The pairs opposite each other are the vertical angles. So angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. Angle 3 and angle 4 are vertical angles. What's nice to know about these is you're going to learn that they are congruent. So angle 1 and angle 2 would be congruent to each other, the same measure. The same with angle 3 and angle 4. Not only that, but you're going to see that angle 1 and angle 3 add up to 180 degrees, which makes them supplementary angles, which we'll talk about later here. So vertical angles, they're the ones right across from each other that you want to be looking for. And they're congruent. So if angle 1 is, let's say, 40 degrees, then angle 2 is automatically 40 degrees. And then you can also figure out that angle 3 would be 140 degrees because those two have to be adding up to 180. And angle 4 would be 140 degrees. So vertical angles, huge, huge type of angle. Please make sure you know how to use that and master it. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. They don't have to be adjacent, although these two are adjacent. Angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary angles. They add up to 90 degrees. And angle A and angle B, although they're not adjacent angles, they do add up to 90 degrees, making them complementary. Same story with supplementary angles. Two angles that add up to 180 degrees. Here, they're also adjacent. Another word for this would be a linear pair. A linear pair would be two adjacent angles that are also supplementary. Angle C and angle B look like those two add up to 180 if you add the 43 and the 137. So you can see that angle B and angle C, although they're not adjacent, they are supplementary. They add up to 180. So as you're looking at diagrams, there are certain things that I'd like you to look for in these diagrams. First of all, and most importantly, I think it's important to look for vertical angles. We don't tell you that angles are congruent sometimes, so you have to figure out on your own what might be congruent or some information in a diagram that's not given to you. So vertical angles are a great way to find a couple of congruent angles. So if you see vertical angles, you know they're congruent. Down here, supplementary angles, look for those, the ones that add up to 180. Look for the complementary angles, anything that adds up to 90 degrees. Look for right angles. That way you know that each angle is 90 degrees. So I don't have to tell you that it's 90 degrees. You should know it if you know it's a right angle. Or you should know that if we have two supplementary angles, that they're adding up to 180, things like that. Here's a postulate for you. It's called the linear pair postulate. If two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. That's just sort of automatically saying if you have a linear pair, you know they are supplementary. Not a postulate you'll really use that much. And then a definition here of an angle bisector. An angle bisector is basically a ray that divides an angle into two congruent angles. So this ray AY cuts angle XAZ into two pieces that are congruent, and those are the congruent marks for those particular pieces. So that's kind of the notes for what we're looking at in section A4. We will look at a couple of examples here coming up shortly.